Students, what's your, well, that happened, moment in the classroom? This happened like 2 to 3 semesters ago in my college. I was in finance class. About 10 minutes from it ending, it was around 2:30, and I had to go to work at 4:30. Planned on hitting the gym in between. On a typical day, I was getting ready to go by drinking my pre-workout in the last 10 minutes of class. Well, it turns out someone had a different plan. We get an email that the school is in a legitimate lockdown. There's a questionable man on campus with a tactical vest and large backpack, walking around campus. Oh boy. So here's the reactions to this information. 50% of the class immediately panics. No idea what to do, huddles in the corner texting their loved ones. One chick bawling her eyes out, making all of the noise, threw up in the corner, sick. Foreign exchange student whips out his laptop and starts a League of Legends game, getting visibly agitated at it in the back of the room. Freaking Yasuo, am I right? Teacher breaks a piece of metal off the vent and stands by the door, prepared to what looks like and Julius Caesar. Professor in the adjacent room, connecting door, walks in and explains that we should all calm down because worst case scenario is we die and we get a cool plaque with our name on it in the hallway. This does not help the students already having anxiety, may I note. I'm over here, phone dying, absolutely yeeted to crap on pre-workout with the inability to expend this energy, wondering if I'll get fired for a no-call, no-show and feeling 99% pissed rather than scared. Looks to the left out the window, SWAT team on the roof. Had this sketchy man come into a room, I'm of the utmost confidence that he would have walked away without harming a single human. Simply because it was apparent that God left this classroom long ago and we were in more hysteria alive than dead. Anyway, 2.5 hours later, I'm able to call my boss after we were allowed to leave and tell him that the kid who got reported as simply a student going to class and had a big backpack. There was no vest. The student who reported him had already gotten in trouble for trying to start a racial conflict a week prior and just had an agenda to push. The amount of pissed I was immeasurable. I'm not sure who I love more. The professor who grabbed a makeshift weapon and was prepared to end an attacker, or the casual baddie professor who seemed confident it was bullcrap and took the opportunity to troll you all. Story 2. I was standing outside the classroom before class. Tim was a popular who played the guitar. Gary was an upperclassman who had been in some troubles before. Tim had hurt himself somehow, and so he was on crutches. We were standing there. Gary comes walking by with a group of dudes and just yanks one of the crutches away from Tim. "Oh, thanks," Tim says. Gary and the dudes walk off and the bell rang, so I walked in and Tim hobbled on one crutch. The teacher saw, but I guess she thought Gary was supposed to take the crutch for some reason. Class was ending and Tim complained because he couldn't get to his next class unless he got his crutch back. The teacher apologized for misunderstanding the situation and phoned the vice principal so that he could try to locate Gary in this crutch. This was not a hard job for the vice principal because Gary had gotten in trouble with him earlier in the day. So he'd stolen the crutch from Tim and probably burst into the vice principal's office and threatened him with it. Story from the dude standing outside the office was that Gary was swinging the crutch around. He knocked over a trash can and was pounding on the desk with a crutch. The vice principal stood across the desk from him with his arms in the chair. He kept saying, "Think about what you're doing, Gary. You don't want to be doing this now." I guess that by the time the teacher called, Gary had been de-escalated and disarmed and it was all over, except for figuring out where the crutch had come from. It would have been great if she could have warned him ahead of time. Story 3. In high school, this big, in size, metalhead was always late for the first class period of the day because he was hanging out in the hallway with his girlfriend for too long and never gave himself enough time to walk to the classroom. The teacher was a real laid-back kind of guy and had a flowing sort of teaching style. He really didn't mind, but one day he got annoyed because he knew the reason. He told the dude that he could say goodbye to his girlfriend a few minutes earlier and get to class on time. There was a little back and forth as this metalhead attempted to bluff or lie his way into some type of excuse. The teacher wasn't having it and said that he had to get to class on time, once. He said, "You have to do it once. If you don't get to this class on time tomorrow, then you're going to have to stay after school for detention." There was back and forth as this metalhead attempted to determine the seriousness of his threat. It seemed pretty serious. The teacher said he'd make the kid help clean the classroom. The next morning, we're all in there, the bell rings, and the teacher opens his mouth to speak. Suddenly from the hallway is the thunderous sound of someone wearing heavy boots running down it towards the room. Accompanying this is a deep-throated scream, "No!" The teacher looks at the class in shock as the door flies open and there is one last thunderous clap from a boot being stomped as the metalhead enters the room. Out of breath, this kid casually walks to his seat and says in his deep, raspy voice, "I don't know what they're screaming about out there." I doubt that anyone else in the school could have yelled like that. The teacher appreciated that an effort was made to get to class on time, even though the kid tried to deny it was him running down the hallway screaming. Story 4. Not my story, but my English teacher in high school told it. A little backstory, I went to an ALC center at this time, which is basically a high school for kids with mental problems and a bad home life that makes regular high school impossible or extremely difficult. Ours happened to be situated in an old strip mall right next to the pizza and pasta. Anyways, it was about 11 a.m. and she was teaching our class when this man just walked in through the front door and into her classroom since it was closest to the front door. He looked around what was very obviously a classroom. A desk, a projector, bookcases, posters about grammar and learning, the whole shebang. and looked at the teacher and started asking her if she wanted to buy his steaks. She asked him to please leave as this was a classroom, insisted that his steaks were high quality and that they were a good price. She asked him again to leave since she was trying to teach. The man turns to the nearest student and starts asking him about buying his steaks. Student just stares at him, not knowing how to respond. My teacher calls in the principal. Principal shows up, man pushes past him and runs out the door and down the street. Teacher just shrugged and went back to teaching. She was a really good teacher and made the kids enjoy being in the class, so no one really wanted to continue talking about it until after class, so that they could continue the lesson. A few years after that, and a few more incidents of people just walking in, we got a new door with security measures on it. It's still a joke around the school as far as I know to randomly say, "I got some high-quality meat," in a weird accent. Story 5. When I was in high school, they brought us all out in the hall while the dogs sniffed our bags we left in class. They indicated this one girl's bag, so they confronted her. She denies having anything, and the search confirms that. It really sucks that they're doing this in front of all her peers instead of handling it privately, but here's where it gets truly terrible. They gave her an incredibly thorough and intimate pat-down right in front of all of us. Still no illegal substances. She's fighting back tears at this point as they take her away to be tested. Surprised they didn't make her piss in front of us. And guess what? Still no illegal substances. After the whole ordeal, they told her, "The dogs do give us false positives sometimes." Guess that's what happened here. All that public humiliation because some dog is bad at its job. No apology, no nothing. The pat-down or body search seems really questionable when a thorough investigation of her backpack revealed nothing. But what's more questionable is you not hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. I gave you time to do it. Done? Now let's get back to the video. Story 6. 3 of our 4 main science teachers, 4th was a great teacher, but old and cranky by that point and not interested in joining their nonsense, had a total bromance club going on and there were tons of antics. Made even better by the fact that all their classrooms were connected by doors between classes and shared prep rooms. It wasn't uncommon to be sitting in class listening to the lecture and see the teacher from next door sneak into the room and steal something, dance around behind the teacher making faces, etc. It was a fun time. It's been some years and I don't remember a lot of specific things, but a couple of note. On Halloween, the 3 of them all came to school dressed as the Powerpuff Girls, I believe. May have been Sailor Moon characters or generic cheerleaders. I don't recall exactly besides it being hilarious. They were all pretty buff, big dudes. One of them, the one I was closest to, turned 40 during my time in high school, and another got a few of the teachers as well as some of the students that were close with him, all in one prank, gifting him 40 of various things. He got a big box of Depends, tampons, for nosebleeds. I gave him 40 cheap whiteboard markers. I had a running prank of stealing and hiding his markers, etc. But I think the best one was that the old cranky teacher also got in on this one. He gave him 40 golf balls, in a box with the bottom undone. So the box was picked up and golf balls bounced everywhere. I wasn't there to witness the chaos, but damn, I wish I had been. So yeah, just generally a ridiculous and really fun bunch. Could totally see the bowling ball thing happening with one of them. I've always loved science. Aside from physics, it can die in a hole. But I definitely think they were influential in my decision to pursue sciences in university. Story 7. These are about my teachers. Number 1, it was my grade 9 French teacher, and the class was full of poop heads that never paid attention, never did their work, and constantly ragged on her for being overweight. One day she absolutely lost it. Took off her shoes and threw them at the class like ninja stars and started throwing desks and chairs. Everyone just stared in stunned silence. She walked out of the class and left us all there and took the rest of the semester off. I always felt awful for her because she was a very sweet lady, and I always made sure to be on my best behavior for her because I could tell how much the kids in that class were getting to her. 2, we had this English teacher in high school. My sister was 2 years older than me and had her first, actually. She had a fantastic husband who was Irish or Scottish or something. He would bring her lunch all the time and basically just super cute. Looked like they were totally in love. Basically, at least from what I understand, because I only had her after all this happened, he left her very unexpectedly and she was never the same after that. So we're in class and she's doing her thing and someone makes some kind of comment and she just lost it, but in a very sad way. Just cried at her desk kind of way and kept saying something along the lines of, "Don't marry the hot guy with the accent. He'll break your heart." Anyway, I have no idea how she is now, but it breaks my heart thinking about it years later. Story 8. Back in 8th grade middle school, we had this really cool and chill US history teacher. He never raised his voice and he was pretty laid back about class and work. He taught us in a storytelling kind of manner, and I don't ever remember annotating any document in his class. Well, we had that one kid. In this story, I'm going to call him Jim. Jim was always late to his class, never turned stuff in. He was that one really cringy kid that everyone either hated or pitied. My teacher never got really fed up with him, but would always show his distaste for him in his facial expressions. My teacher normally would pull him aside to talk to him about his tardiness or missing assignments. Jim would say he would be earlier or do the assignments, but he of course never did. One day Jim walks in late again. My teacher is about to start teaching, and when he turns and sees Jim walking in, well, this time my teacher wasn't so happy about it. The It was the middle of the school year towards the end, and my teacher must have gotten so fed up with Jim at that point. My teacher yells Jim's name at the top of his lungs. He normally had a boomy voice, but when he yelled, it amplified 100 times over. The ground literally shook when he yelled, and I'm sure they could hear him from downstairs at the other end of the school. Our school wasn't that small either. For the rest of the class period, about 30 minutes, literally it was dead silent. Everyone was still kind of shocked by it. Story 9. Not in the classroom, but it's still something that happened at school. On the last day of school, the entire high school goes into the theater for assembly. Then the entire grade presents the students that are leaving, and for every person that is leaving, a friend of theirs will walk up with a microphone and state why they will miss them, their achievements, etc. In our school year, this kid, let's call him John, was a complete a-hole. He treated everyone badly and smoked in school, etc. Rumors have it that he was asked to leave at the end of the year and that he was pretty much expelled, but he was still presented by his friend in front of the whole high school. When his friend finished talking, he grabbed the microphone, pointed to our principal, and shouted in it, "I'm glad that I'm leaving this school, else I'll never ever have to see your freaking face again." Then he gave the mic to his friend and left via backstage. Everyone was at this assembly, from grade 9 to grade 12. Every teacher, counselor, even the principal and the director of the school was there. There was a huge gasp and everyone was completely silent for the next 30 seconds. Then the next people which are leaving walked up to the stage. So, yeah, that happened. Story 10. Freshman year of college, I had one professor who would randomly call on students in class, and if they didn't answer correctly, he would proceed to give them a roast in front of the whole class for their lack of knowledge on the subject material. I was in the class with a few of my good friends, as it was a prerequisite that we all needed to have. Even though we got our fair share of roasting from him as well, we all thought it was funny, and knew it was his way of making sure the students are engaged in the lecture. About halfway through the semester, he called on one person, and after she incorrectly answered, he started to casually roast this student. At this point, another girl raised her hand to get the prof's attention. After he called on her, she proceeded to vocally berate him about how he was treating us all like children, as well as call him every vulgar word she could think of. At this point, he's shouting back at her too, complete with all the same vulgarities that she used on him, and me and my friends are just sitting in the back laughing under our breath while simultaneously being completely dumbfounded that this kind of stuff actually happens in college. Finally, he yells at her to leave the lecture. She obliges, and as soon as she's out of the room, he proceeds to roast her even more to the class. It was so odd to see something like this, especially since I had just come from high school a few months before. Man, college is wild. What an unprofessional way to treat people. It's those types of teachers that remove any love of learning from the hearts of many students. Sad. Story 11. When I was a sophomore in high school, there was this one day in my French class where we were going over the homework from the day before. The homework that comes from the book is divided into different sections by letter. So section A, section B, and so forth. At one point, going over the assignment, no one was paying attention to the teacher and we were just talking to the people around us. She wanted someone to read their answers from the next section and no one was listening to her. She was getting frustrated at this point, so she raised her voice and said, "I want the D." There was 2 seconds of silence followed by everyone busting out laughing. One of those moments that I'll never forget. Story 12. Freshman year, I made the horrible mistake of taking Psych 101 at 8 a.m. So, of course, hungover, made it to class, sat down, opened my notebook, and promptly fell asleep. Woke up to the professor asking me a question. I answered it accurately. I'd taken a similar class in high school. He glared at me and moved on. Then I looked down at my notebook to find page after page of little notes and cartoons from the whole class. Mostly themes on you snore loudly and you look like an idiot with your mouth hanging open. The shame was strong with me that day. Story 13. Probably one of the most embarrassing moments of my life right here. It was 7th grade English class and my crush and the first girl I ever made out with was in the class. I don't remember if we kissed before or after this happened. Maybe after. Anyway, I let one rip, silent but deadly, literally by definition. It smelled so bad that the kids around me started freaking out and obviously my whole body's turning red. It caused such a distraction in the class from people laughing that the teacher made me go in the hall while the stench dissipated. After 5 minutes, I was allowed back in and had to perform the walk of shame past my crush back to my desk that was drowning in Febreze. Story 14. So in primary school, I was around 11, and we had the system of classes visiting the school's library for about an hour to stimulate you to read books. It worked really well. Once a class is finished, a member of that class could go warn the next class, appointed by the teacher, to go to the library. I was appointed to go do that, and I'm pretty proud of it. I knocked on the door, opened it, and wanted to say, "Hey, it's your turn to go to the library." But suddenly I was distracted by what was on the blackboard, the word Mediterranean Sea in huge letters. This class was being taught about it. So yeah, "Hey, it's your turn to go to the Mediterranean Sea," is what actually came out of my mouth. Bonus, no one of my own class found out. Extra bonus, the word in our language for library is bibliothèque, but in dialect in those times, another word was bouquerie, which translates to bookery, and I think bookery would be a nice word for library. If I ever have a home library, I'm calling it the bookery. Story 15. I go to an art school where my department is directly above the sculpture department. Plus, the building is structured so the center of the floor is open so we can see and hear everything that happens below us in the hallways. Needless to say, we hear a lot of performance art sometimes in class. My favorite was when we were just critiquing in one of my late classes where everyone, even the professor, was exhausted. We often kept the door open because it automatically locks and people needed to get in and out to go to the bathroom, etc. Suddenly, we hear metal items fall from somewhere and the blood-curdling shrieks of 1,000 banshees from outside our classroom. Things keep falling and soon enough, maybe 2 other girls screech along. It sounded like people were being roughed up with pots and pans, but they just wouldn't die. We were ready to freaking yeet out of there just to avoid being slain. My professor hurried out to look out from the balcony or hallway and just saw a group of people watching these 3 girls screaming like they were being exorcised by Satan himself. I saw her turn and look at us with the most "I'm freaking done" faces she's ever made and walk back inside and shake her head. We just closed the door and tried to tune it out. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy Students, what is the dumbest reason you got kicked out of class? Story 5 was unbelievable. See you in that video.